All right. Welcome to ParDreamin. I am Sarah, a marketing technology solution architect at Slack, and I'm here today with David, solution architect at Workato, and Mike Cruiser, solution architect at Sercante. Today, we want to impart on you all of the possibilities and benefits of integrating not only tools, but also teams across your organization, and the cool, honestly, just cool stuff we can do through technology to help teams work better together and work more efficiently, and hopefully at the end of the day make more money and grow our teams. We have tons of cool use cases to share with you, so we're going to get right to it. I did want to cover, we want to make sure if you look in where you're looking at the slides right now, if you look in the upper left-hand corner, there's a little white square with 4 arrows. If you click that, you can go full screen on the slides. Just make sure that you don't click anywhere in the screen, which sounds funny, but if you click it, it will pause your screen, so you won't see we progress the slides. But it is helpful when you want to see some of the visuals that we're going to show of some of the tools and processes we've put together today. So first off, we're going to talk about one of the hot topics of, I feel like, both 2019 and 2020, which is ABM, account-based marketing. Most marketing automation platforms were created in a way where they really just look at the person object. They aren't looking at the account. Some of them have started to kind of put together account views, but they're pretty basic. They're not, in my opinion, anywhere close to what our marketing teams and sales teams are asking of us. So how do we figure out how we can automate things like the tagging of target accounts in a scalable way? Mike and I, in a past life, had to work on a project where basically we were handed a sheet of domains and asked, make sure all leads coming in are stamped that they are part of this target account list so we can, further segment and target them with relevant content and let sales know that these are the top hot leads to follow up with. At the time, it was a huge list. Like you think about like 10,000 domains. So to set that up as a list in Pardot was going to be difficult to do in the first place and then also difficult to manage. So we were tasked with figuring out a way that we could programmatically update that list without having to go in and make tons of manual changes that were difficult for end users. Because I had someone like Mike who's very good at code, we were able to leverage the process you'll see on the right-hand side of the table stakes from Pardot to Heroku. And basically, we could use Heroku to host some code that essentially was just doing, I guess, a fancy lookup table or a fancy sheet. So we had an Excel sheet of the domains, or in a Google sheet in this case, we could host it in the cloud. And whenever someone came into Pardot, whenever that activity of create happened in Pardot, the code in Heroku would be looking at the sheet and looking at their domain to compare and decide if they were a target account or not. If they were a target account, we marked them as such, and then marketers are very happy, sales is very happy, they could target them intelligently. If you aren't lucky enough to have someone who works in code and is very familiar and can write an app like that, you also have the option of a tool like Workato. These middleware tools are great at being able to just host something like an Excel sheet and automating that even without needing any kind of code. It's more like a clicks kind of process there. If you're extra fancy and have extra budget, you might have a tool like a Demandbase, 6sense, Lattice, or Terminus, any of the ABM platforms. You can get even more fancy with that in terms of they will do a lot of that auto tagging. And then you can kind of surface more insights from that ABM tool into Pardot using something like a Workato. And I feel like that's something that not a lot of people talk about. You may have a native integration with one of these tools, but it may not do what you want it to do. So it may just do kind of like the basics, but maybe you're trying to do something more specific, like some of the use cases we're going to talk about later in this presentation. You can use a tool like Workato in order to create your own custom integration without having to dive too much into code, which is really helpful.
Mike, you're muted.
I am muted. One of the things I like working on is data migration. We get a merger and acquisition, trying to onboard that new data platform, bits and pieces of it need to happen right now. GDPR, Castle compliance, there's things that just need to happen immediately, and there's things that we can take our time and work a little bit more reasonable pace. So having the ability to connect the same or different technologies together in a way that we can start sharing the bits and pieces that we need to share, unsubscribes, getting sync from Pardot or Marketo back and forth, dealing with, GDPR compliance, where did these people come from? How did we collect the consent? Which system is the system of record for holding on to these consent records? Getting all that data pushed around quickly works really well with integration tools, and then we can also, that buys us some time to kind of slow down and do the rest of that onboarding, integration, acquisition, bringing the teams in at a more reasonable and sane pace.
All right, so master data management. This is a sort of integration use case that I see is getting more and more popular, especially in high growth companies or high volume companies that have a lot of leads coming in, companies like Slack, Zoom, where there's a lot of free users, especially, but really across the industry. So let's take a look at a typical master data management model. So the concept here with master data management is as your business grows, as your team grows, you start to accumulate quite a few software products at your company, right? So you've got Pardot, obviously. You may also have on the left side there like a database with all your product usage information and your user information. And then you've got other platforms like Salesforce on the left side. Like you've got a big stack of platforms that are all sort of collecting their own data and generating their own data. And some of that data in one platform might be useful to another platform. So the concept is we want to use the APIs to pull all of the relevant information out of Pardot, out of the product database, out of Salesforce, out of everywhere, and pull it down into a marketing data hub, which could be an on-prem SQL database, or it could be if you have Snowflake, something like that, and you might have something like Tableau layered on top of that marketing hub database so that you can run some analytics on top of that. But then perhaps equally importantly, on top of doing analytics on the marketing hub database, you can then also, we want to use the APIs to pull that data back out. So maybe some of the data that was collected by Pardot is going to be useful to see in Salesforce Marketing Cloud, right? So using these APIs to pull the data into the marketing hub in a structured way, and then push it back out to all those same applications and or different ones so that they have the information you need to target your prospects effectively.
So now that we've covered some of our past projects or projects that we're working on with businesses right now, we're going to take a look at some kind of future-looking use cases, things that we're looking at building right now or that we see coming up, in the future. So a great example of something I'm working on right now is looking at what we're calling compete like unit. So we're bringing together data and different tools, especially tools that traditionally sales will be using. So something like a Gong, it's like, I feel like the concept there is, oh, well, it's a sales tool, leave it alone, don't do anything with it. But Gong really, and really any sales tool, is a data mine for us because it's free data directly from our leads and prospects that we can tap into that sales is already getting that, for us for free. So I'm looking at how do we utilize that data to better target people and to help sales sell more quickly. So a great example is in Gong, we can see when someone mentions a competitor name. We have a competitor category, we can see the name pop up, and we can actually access that through the API. So when someone is on a Gong call with a sales rep and they mention a competitor, I can do things automatically, like I can alert the deal team in Slack, and I can, give them even a competitor specific battle card. and tell them, hey, we have a competitive deal. The team, all be up on the same page at the same time as this is happening. We can update the Salesforce opportunity to a competitive deal so that everyone has that visibility as well. We can update the prospect field in Pardot, and we can even use that to throw them onto a dynamic list and put them automatically in an engagement studio nurture. So we can put them right on a competitive nurture that can help that sales rep make the case. And then we can even tell Drift, hey, this is a person who's looking at a competitor. So let's just show them a competitive playbook and just really hit them everywhere with that competitive message against that competitor.
Yep. And so this is sort of I guess it sort of bounces back to the master data management a little bit. Slack is a company that we've worked with quite a bit, and they, in this illustration here, we're showing Slack is pulling data. They're collecting their product usage data. And if you're a software company, I mean, this is critical for marketing. It blows my mind how often, I'll see software companies that are not leveraging product usage data to tailor their marketing messaging or to enable targeting within their marketing platform, right? So at the time, we did this project, Pardot was not involved, but I suspect that'll change. But the concept is, Slack will collect their product usage data that accumulates in S3, and they're sending it there via the APIs, and then we're pulling the product usage data out, and based on what that product the product usage data looks like, we know we want to send it all to Snowflake, so it's there for analytics. We want to sort of update Salesforce Marketing Cloud, maybe Salesforce itself, to indicate which accounts are sort of trending up or down in product usage, maybe even individual users. And then finally, Slack, this may not surprise you a lot, but Slack uses Slack a lot internally for, as Sarah mentioned, sort of sending out alerts. And so we may, if we see a concerning trend in product usage for a certain account, let's say, we would maybe then send an alert out to the CSM, or to maybe it's a free trial user and the product usage data looks great. And so we want to send an alert out to the SDR on Slack and make that alert really actionable, have it so that the alert allows them to add the person to an outreach cadence or sales loft sequence, what have you, right? But there's a lot of different cool stuff you can do with product usage data if you just get your hands on it and get something that helps you use the APIs. Okay, another one, this is actually, we've kind of mentioned, and you'll have to, in case you haven't yet, you want to click the full screen button at the top left to just zoom in on this one a little bit. But this is actually, I can't remember whether Slack implemented this first or we did. We kind of learn a lot from each other, but what we're doing, what we found internally is that it was really powerful for us to, if our goals were to decrease lead response time, right? Like get to the leads faster, increase speed to lead, and then increase conversion rates, right? Okay, great, we have the reps following up quickly. How do we make sure that the conversations go well? This solution is what helped us do that, right? So we've talked a lot about sending alerts out via Slack, right? So this is an example of that, where if you have an MQL, let's say, somebody has filled out the contact us form, then that alert might be routed and sent out to an SDR via Slack, and it provides all sorts of, it's cross-referencing data from like all the engagement activity you have in Pardot, all the account information you have, do some lead to account matching, figure out, okay, is this a target account or not? And then kind of present all this information. Maybe you're enriching it with a vendor like Clearbit or something like that on the way there, but you present this alert to the SDR with all the information they could want about this person, which has been gathered via the APIs. And then on the bottom right there, kind of zooms in and shows with Slack's APIs, you can actually make these alerts really actionable so that without leaving Slack, your SDRs are able to accept the lead, and it'll, then you can then go update. It'll update Salesforce to update the lead status for them, or you can even do things like have the SDR reassign the lead or add it to a SalesLoft sequence or outreach cadence, declare that it's a low fit, and they're getting all this work done without ever having to leave Slack or log into those other tools. So it saves a lot of time on the follow-up, which is increasing the speed to lead and can make it more relevant. So it works really well for us.
Another thing that we hear about a lot is getting sales and marketing working together. But what about our tools, right? Yeah, they all talk to the CRM, but like the data is summarized in the CRM, and we don't have that full nuance of what's going on in each of our tools available. So if we were to connect some of the sales tools and the marketing tools together directly through various integrations, to our own business needs, we can have things like our sales enablement software tell marketing, hey, this is what the salesperson's talking about with this account, and then marketing can then pick that up and do that ABM thing. Hey, we're talking to these people. Let's change the story that we're presenting to everybody else that sales isn't talking to at that organization, trying to find additional people in the buying center so we can get the sales team talking to the right people. And because our two different entire sets of technology are now working together, working in concert, we can do that in a much more aligned, much more thoughtful process, and we can give a better overall user experience because we're not forced to deal with the summarized data that is in our CRM.
Yeah, that integration is really helpful. So this is our last slide. I'll kind of give my spiel on it, and I think Sarah probably has a couple comments on it. But I just love this slide because it shows all the different ways that you can. It shows several different options for and opportunities for integration and automation across your tech stack. Just within the context, like this whole slide is just focusing on if you have a webinar to run, right? So depending on how large your organization is, you may start your planning for the webinar. You may start your project planning in a platform like Rike or Asana, something like that, right? And and you may decide kind of the name of the webinar and all this different information about the webinar, like the time and date that's going to happen, right? So, and once that project gets to a certain stage or a certain thing occurs in Rike, you can trigger off that and with using the APIs to actually go automatically schedule that webinar for you in On24. And then from there, once you have the webinar scheduled, you may want to have, like if somebody somehow comes and registers through the On24 form, you probably want to push those registrants to a list in Pardot or something like that. And then similarly, if you're collecting registrations through Pardot, if you're adding them to a list, you can push those registrants to On24. This is all done via the APIs, right? The webinar will then at some point actually occur, right? So moving on to point 4 here, once the webinar has occurred, you would want attendees to be pushed maybe to a Salesforce campaign so that your SDRs and sales reps, CSMs can view this and follow up with people as appropriate. And so pushing the data to Salesforce, you can also, you can take this automation as far as you want, right? Like at some point, if you want to write a custom email to them, you have to have a human do that, right? But if you want to maybe automatically add these people to a follow-up sequence in outreach, or send notifications out to your SDRs and reps on Slack to notify them of the hottest leads from the webinar that attended, right? You can automate those notifications or that transition to an outreach sequence. And you can also do things like, you can make it so if your reps are in Slack and they want to see who attended a webinar, they can type a / command to view webinar attendee data for a certain webinar that recently occurred. This is all possible to do partly because Slack's APIs are awesome, because Salesforce APIs are awesome. And then finally, number 7 there is just a lot of companies, like we were talking about, want to pump all their data into a data lake like Snowflake, with perhaps a Tableau or some sort of BI tool layered on top of that database, so you can run analysis on that. But yeah, so
I
this is,
call this slide,
go
I was gonna
ahead.
say, I call this slide the marketer's dream. I feel like so many marketers spend so much manual time on setting up webinars or moving lists around, lists of registrants, lists of attendees. This is really what we're aiming towards, and some businesses are already getting there. But I think the larger market, we really want to strive for something like this, where we can take a lot of the manual work away from humans and have them focus on things that are more valuable than moving a list around. Wouldn't you
Yeah.
agree, David?
Yeah, I totally agree, and I think it starts to show you. This slide just shows you, it's really important not only to be getting your different tools integrated so you can maximize value and maximize automation where possible, but also, like, it just goes to show, like, when the tools need to come together, the teams need to come together too, right? So expanding to work with our ops friends in other departments, whether that be the customer success department, or even, I can think of use cases with HR and things like that, right? So bringing the tools and the teams and the data together. And I guess I think that's all we got there. We're going to have a Q&A session, Sarah.
Yeah, we have a couple questions in already. The first one that came in is, do we have a recommended process for identifying bottlenecks across these integrations?
Seeing what people open tickets about. I hear a lot through, what I'll do is I'll look at tickets, because of course usually people open tickets around pain points. I like to shadow different teams, either all hands or some of their weekly meetings, because usually you'll kind of hear the gossip of the day of, what's a pain point, why can't they get this campaign done faster, things like that. I think that's a huge deal, especially for those of us in operations, to not become siloed within our own group, or if we report into marketing, not to only attend marketing meetings. I try to really go to, like David said, like customer success meetings, go to sales meetings to hear what they're experiencing, what pain points they have. I try to also have a day in the life of different like roles that I kind of serve in a kind of, I guess, side way. So I might report under marketing, but sales is a customer of me, customer success is a customer of me. So not only kind of joining the larger groups, because I feel like sometimes, especially with leadership, some of the individual contributors can feel a little bit intimidated from telling it how it is. So I'll schedule a meeting with, someone who is an individual contributor, but maybe like the best performing rep, and see what they're doing, see what's working for them, see what pain points they have.
Yeah, that's good feedback. And I guess then sort of, that's interesting. That's a very good way to think about it. I was kind of thinking about it from a technical perspective, like, can I go look at any analytics to see where in this integration or automation flow is really running all the time, trying to do a lot of jobs and whatnot. And that's something that sometimes, especially if you're not a developer, can be kind of tough to go do and see which of these integrations is really running a lot of jobs and kept most busy, and maybe we should be running concurrencies and things like that. So depending on the tools available to you, in a tool like Workato, in Workato you can go and view that information to see where kind of the congestion is, and consider maybe duplicating, running some concurrent workflows and whatnot to ease the tension there.
We have a couple more questions. The next one is, what's the process to discover new integrations or automations that you've put in place? I'm not sure I'm following what this question's for.
I think that sounds similar to the other question in terms of like, how do you find opportunities to automate, or like how do you identify what the most important are? I try to really look at what are humans spending the most time on, and is it something that is getting us revenue or not? Kind of like I mentioned earlier, with the marketer's dream slide, it's like if we see that marketers are spending tons of hours a week on moving lists around, that probably isn't really generating us any added revenue. So that's an opportunity to look at how do we make that easier. And some things you can't automate, right? Like some things, there have to be some kind of manual parts of it for some reason. Could be security reasons, could be honestly just user preference. But the goal is to look at what can we safely automate so that we aren't tying our own hands behind our back, because that can be another issue. Sometimes if we over automate, it's like users get frustrated by that because they can't do any kind of pivoting whatsoever. But what are things that are pretty consistent that we don't see changing in a major way in the next quarter or two, and hopefully a year or two, that we can automate and just help the end user move more quickly? That's how I look at it.
Yeah, so we're over in time now, but let's get to the rest of these questions because they're really good ones. When building an integration like the one with Reich on 24 and Outreach, who are the internal stakeholders that you engage with?
Yeah, so so you need somebody who, I mean, all of that is what we showed there is entirely possible to do by writing code, right? So if you want to go out and write, I don't know, I'm not a developer, right? But if you have somebody who can write Python or Ruby, whatever it is, if you have a hardcore developer, it's gonna take them a while, but like they could do that. And the other option for who can do it is people like us. I mean, I've been in marketing operations or working in that space for like 10 years, and I'm not a developer. I'm like somewhat technical, and I've always been sort of interested in getting more technical. And so I don't mean to just keep self-promoting, but like using a platform like Workato, that's really what Workato does, is give non-developers, it gives business users the ability to essentially write code and achieve a lot of these integrations. These projects don't take 5 minutes, but these are things that marketing ops professionals like you and me can actually now do with these low-code platforms.
I'd like to add some.
I will say that you have to get comfortable with reading API documentation, at least probably a little bit, right, to get to that level. Yeah.
I'd like to add, sometimes you probably need somebody that's willing to kind of reach a little bit beyond what they ought to and be helpful to try to engage people who don't normally or just don't have the time to become a stakeholder, and they're just like, I don't have time to deal with this. And then you just step in and say, hey, I can help you with this. Do you mind reaching out beyond what they probably ought to? And then we have one more question. How do we manage the training of salespeople on these integrations? Besides manuals, we have weekly, monthly sessions, QAs, and the other ideas. I know for me personally, I've hosted an open office hours, like that Pardot style open office hours, but for the sales team supporting the sales platforms. So very much reaching outside of what I was supposed to be doing, should be doing, but providing support for another team on their tooling. I found that very helpful for just helping them onboarding, but also getting the adoption. What else do we have for ideas?
I think it's really important to meet with sales. I cannot stress that enough. I can't tell you how many times I've heard from marketing like, oh yeah, we surfaced this wonderful information, and why isn't, sales are just a bunch of knuckleheads not using it. And then I go meet with sales and I'm like, hey, so like, do you see this data? And they're like, what data? Where can I get that data? That sounds awesome. Where is it? And then we discover that they never were given the list view or the data, like the field visibility to actually see it. I feel like that often gets forgotten. I think the answer to that question depends upon your organization. Some organizations have sales enablement teams, and those are great people to work with and get on the same page with. I think the biggest thing, and of course, other organizations don't, so you might want to work directly with sales or sales leadership to do, have a session like that and be kind of like the interim sales enablement. But I think the most important part is really the pitch. I have had a lot of success with showing, like, you should care about this because it will get you this. I call it like the carrot on the end of the stick. Like, this stuff may not seem very exciting, like the automation part, like showing a slide like we showed today, but here's what it will get you. And ultimately, hopefully it gets you more money. And of course, everyone loves to hear that. I don't know anyone who wants less money. So definitely, I think a key is making sure that you have formed a pitch to explain to them why they should care. And I've had a lot of success with getting people very interested in making those efforts successful when they see why it should matter to them.
Yeah. Yeah, like Sarah, I mean, on that Gong competitor example you gave, like one of the things that happens in that workflow is, okay, if I'm a rep working a deal and a competitor gets mentioned on my call, that workflow is gonna pair me up. It's gonna let me know, hey, this competitor got mentioned on your call, and here's the top 3 reps in the last 90 days who have been beating that competitor, right? Like, why as a sales rep, you should love that, but you should always kind of have these discussions with them probably in advance, right, to make sure that you're building the right thing for them, and then do the training and validate that it's actually being helpful, right?
Yeah, don't throw something over the wall. That's another mistake I see a lot. Sales can get exhausted by just like tool exhaustion. Because I think what's happened to marketing is now happening to sales, where there are like a million tools and not a whole lot of thought to enablement for a lot of those tools. So people just tend to, like, sales manager might just like throw it over the wall and be like, here, use this. And if you think about sales, they are extremely time sensitive, or sensitive, I guess, to time spent on things, where, if they're spending time on learning this tool, they're not spending that time on a deal, which is not contributing to their bottom line and their quota. So it's really important to make sure, like David said, that they're aware of this change, that they're bought into it, and that you have a way to measure or get feedback. That's another gap that I see a lot, is if I'm releasing something to sales, I demand we need some way to get feedback, whether it's like some kind of field in there or some kind of form they can fill out, a Slack channel. I need some way for someone to tell me if this was awesome or if it sucked. Because the last thing we need is to put something out there that sucks, and then people start to lose faith in what we're doing, and they don't care to hear from us. So that is hugely important as well.
That's it for the questions. Thank you, everybody, for attending. Any last moments or last comments?
No, thank you.
I think that's it. I think the slides are going to be available for download after, right, Mike?
Yeah, I think I saw 30 days for the recording and possibly the slides.
So yeah, definitely. I know we went through tons of concepts very quickly here. We had a hard time cutting down to what we wanted to talk about. And then if you actually pick up the slides, we have extra slides in there that we hid for this presentation, but that show other really cool use cases. Hopefully kind of get the creative juices flowing. So I definitely would look out for those slides when the download is available. Thanks so much, everyone.